Hey everybody, this is Dan with Pain Free You. Today I have the pleasure of getting together with Joy from Colorado, Joy Sharp, and she was in my group coaching program for a while, and she volunteered to share her story with all of you, and we're gonna have a little conversation, and hopefully you can pick up some tips and tricks and overall concepts and mindsets. And Joy comes to us with a pretty good background. She's trained in IFS, which is internal family systems, right? Did I get
Yep.
that?
Yep.
So she brings some of that knowledge into the whole mind body TMS, perceived danger, pain realm. And she wanted to share her story. So welcome, Joy. Really a pleasure to see you again. I used to
Yeah.
do group calls quite often. So welcome. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. Um, there's a few reasons why I wanted to share my journey. One of them is because I had a symptoms that I don't usually find. Like, if I went and searched on, it was hard to find people with the same kind of symptoms that I had. And yeah, my, um, so the symptoms that first started that really were my wake up call that really started me on this mind body journey were it started with a pinch in my groin, and it was about 2019. It was right before COVID started. I think that was 2019.
Mhm.
um, and it began when I thought I was going to lose my housing, and this is a big clue, but it started there. And I didn't connect the dots because I didn't know anything about mind body, but it mimicked a pain that I had had 6 years prior, which ended up being a hip replacement and with osteoarthritis. So this mimicking, got my attention, and I was like, "Oh no, I have another hip going, right?" And I went to the doctor, and the doctor took the x-ray, and it was fine, and she sent me on my way to the PT, and we did that route for a while. And then the housing crisis went away, and the pain went away, and I lived my life. And then COVID happened, and then I lost the job, and I started seeing a housing crisis again. I was warned that I was going to have to move.
Right.
And this happened all at the same time. And then the pain came back. Um, I couldn't find a place to rent. And it was during COVID, and I ended up house sitting for people, which was difficult because not a lot of people were traveling.
Right.
And I just sort of managed managed everything. I just, put on my big girl boots and swept everything under the rug and put the things in
Sure.
storage and moved into the house sitting. And then the pain started getting worse, and it moved from um, a strong pinch down into kind of like wrapping around my whole joint. And I went and got the MRI, and the MRI showed labral tear, FAI, which is kind of like bones that don't fit right. There's a term for it. I can't remember what it's called. Cysts and edema and all these things. And the person that read my imaging, came up with, "Wow, your hip's a mess." Right? That's what I got. And so I had the structural, idea going on a lot. And so back to the PT, talking to surgeons. I talked to three different surgeons, and they all gave me three different options. But the last one that I liked the most was, he said, "You've got years left on your hip. Go live your life." And that should have been my, my big clue right there. And so I believed him because I liked him the most. And I did. I kind of kept going. I hiked more. I kept going. but we're 4 months into homelessness. I was house sitting, but it wasn't stable at all. And then, Dan, we never know exactly why the symptoms get worse, but all of a sudden they started spreading down like my inner thigh.
Mhm.
And I looked online and I found, this program that addressed labral tear, FAI, and getting the hips all balanced so you avoid surgery. So I did that program. But you're focusing on that area, and the symptoms just kept getting worse and worse. I didn't know what to do about it, but kind of keep going down that path of exercising. And then I finally landed into housing, permanent housing. It's very hard to find housing around here. It's very expensive, but I found some, and the symptoms backed off again. Right. And then I was like, okay, there's something really interesting going on. And I started hiking and I was living my life again. And the symptoms were there, but they were manageable. And then once again, it was like a year later now, I had to move again because the landlords wanted to raise my rent astronomically. And I moved into another place, and it just, I don't know, I wasn't comfortable. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel secure. And the symptoms got much, much worse. They went down into my knee, my whole quadricep, my glute, my low back, my shins, my calves, my foot. I had to start walking on a cane. And thankfully, I'm kind of somebody that keeps finding an answer, right? And I knew what I was doing wasn't correct. And I started to connect the stress with the symptoms progressing the way they were. And somebody mentioned Lorimer Mosley's
Yep.
website in Australia.
Yeah.
And I looked on that one and I was like, this is in Australia. This is cool. But who does this around here? Who does this mind body stuff around here? And then I found the Curable app, and I just joined it because they had a free trial, and I started to look at it, and it just started to make sense to me.
Yep.
But by that time, the pain at that point was very severe. I could barely take a step. And I was waking up in the middle of the night with unbelievable intensity. And it was kind of freaky, right? So once I found the Curable app, it just made sense to me, and I could feel something kind of start to shift, right? And then the Curable app was really great for me as far as the education and the success stories and the expert interviews. But when it came to the exercises, the writing and the meditation things, it was like it was too convoluted. It was too much, and that's when I found you. And I just started watching your videos online just for a few days, and I was like, I want to join his group. I need real simple approaches here.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I joined your group, I was still in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And my personality, the hypervigilance of my brain was so switched on. You don't notice it coming on, right? But you don't feel like yourself. And I remember being on those calls and just feeling so shaky, and going out into public and feeling like so shaky. And if people looked at me, I'd feel so shaky, like everything was dangerous.
Yeah.
And even talking on those calls was scary as shit. Other people I know feel the same way.
Yeah.
And just remember telling you how scary it was to even take a step.
Mhm.
And you knew exactly what I meant. And that was huge to me. It was like, he gets this. He knows this level of, perceived danger that the brain can get to. And I remember telling you, Dan, I took a step and I wasn't so gripped. And you said, that's huge. And I was like, it is. And noticing that, this is a win. This is a win in mind body. And, I was very much needing to like hang on the walls and walk with my cane just to get to the bathroom.
Right.
Um, putting my clothes on took enormous effort. It was exhausting.
Right.
Everything was exhausting. Um, Also, another thing that you helped me with was those pictures of your body that you were all crooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what happened to me. My pelvis got all crooked. It got all, everything started to contract, and it makes everything crooked. And my foot turned purple and it turned inward like a drop foot. And it was pretty alarming, but I had your example, and I hung on to that with dear life. I just hung on. And I said, Dan did it. And so let's not give this any energy. I know what's causing it. And I just, like many others in our group, I had to really hold on to your conviction that I could recover, that this was going to get better. Because even after a lot of weeks, it wasn't getting better. But your conviction, it just started to, get things. You don't notice it, but something inside of you starts to lessen, right? You just start
The intensity
getting,
of fear starts to ease up just a little bit.
yeah, yeah. And those are the things that we need to really pay attention to in mind body work, because if we're focusing on the symptoms getting better, mine didn't get better for a long, long time. Maybe a little bit, but it took a very long time. And, we don't know what causes that severity of the hypervigilance. But in my case, that danger kept coming in and kept coming in and kept coming in. And finally, it just got to the point where it was on full on. Um,
Yeah.
so, and listening to everybody in the group, and, we had such a wonderful group of people, and everything was a miracle when we would share these little wins. It was a miracle, and and like I'd hear people that weren't in that same hypervigilant state that I was in and go, wow, I want to be that calm again. I want to feel that normalcy, that level of normalcy again. And that was the hardest part, I think, for me, is like the pain was really intense, but not feeling like myself, right? Which mind body syndrome does. It makes us feel like altered in some way.
Well, when you're covered with that much fear,
Yeah,
conscious and subconscious, and you said you're not even sure where all that danger is coming from. Whether it's, I believe sometimes once we get deep into the symptom levels, just the fear of the symptoms alone are enough to keep the whole thing going. And the worry that how long is this going to take? And will I get out of this, come out the other end? That's a lot of perceived danger, right?
yeah,
And so just the fear of the symptoms alone is enough to keep us in them, which is why I really focus so much on the knowledge side of it. Like, okay, but these are false alarms. They're not real evidence of damage, even though you had stories going, boy, your hip is messed up. But you
yeah,
saw enough correlation between your stressful events of housing and getting that resolved and symptom levels coming down, that fortunately you were able to connect the dots and go, this makes more sense than the medical explanation.
Yeah.
If the
Yeah.
hip were messed up, why the heck would the pain level come down when you found an apartment? Like that just doesn't make
Right.
logical sense if it was a body.
Right.
So brilliant. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, it's good. And I kind of want to throw a couple of background things in there. I've always had my body symptoms ever since I can remember. I had bad allergies, I had stomach issues, and then as I got older, I had back stuff. I had, I just insomnia, and the digestive issues and the insomnia kind of stayed with me through the whole time. But I just always thought it was just the way things were. Um, your message of it's the mindset, and this is such an important piece, and I had to kind of further my journey with my body, because I felt after about 6 months, I was starting to plateau. But one of the things that I kept noticing wasn't going away was this kind of an emotional thing. It was like a downward despairing energy. Um, and even though it wasn't something that I had experienced before, it kind of came in with the severity of the symptoms. This downward despair wasn't leaving, and I didn't know what to do about it. And so even though I was feeling better, I mean, so if I joined you in the beginning of February, and I think I stayed with you until June,
Mhm.
right? A couple of just big wins was I applied the mind body to the food allergies, the wheat and the dairy, and I started eating them, and I got through the symptoms, and I was starting, I was able to eat wheat again with no symptoms, with nothing happening. Um, and I could just slowly start to feel something letting go. I wasn't, I didn't need to hang on the walls to go to the bathroom. I was able to do more gradually as we all start to notice it's very small, minutia increments of improvements. But we hang on to those things. I started doing things like, I went on that big trip right away. I packed up my truck, my car, and I went on a camping trip, which was difficult to do with a cane. And it, took a lot of work to pack up the car, but I went. Um, and sitting became a non-issue. I could sit, whereas before sitting was a real big issue. And I just knew that sitting was safe, and driving for hours, the pain just went away. Um, but the walking was the biggest trigger. And so walking, which is interesting because I'm a hiker, so that would get my attention the most. So I love to dance. And so there were these free concerts in the park. And so I started going to those, and friends would help me. And I started to get out more in public. And this is important because in mind body, I just wanted to hide out. I didn't want to be seen by anybody, because that was dangerous if people saw me walking the way I was walking.
Mhm.
And I had to show, my brain that being seen, even if I was limping really bad and looked like I was in pain, it was safe.
Sure.
That was one of the last things to go, interestingly enough. So anyway, this emotional component for me, now that I know a lot more about myself, was a big clue. And there was something that kind of wanted to suck me into this kind of like despair. And when the symptoms were really bad, I got in a pretty dark place.
Right.
It was really scary. And like for many others, right? You don't
Yeah,
know
very,
if you'll
very
ever,
common.
yeah, you don't know if you're going to get better. And that's why having you was so important. So one of the things is I did is I wanted to understand like how my brain worked a little bit more. And I went and I read Dr. Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And it talks about the things that we learn, right? It's basic neuroscience. And I started to go, okay, if there is repression in me, how do I get to that? Because I knew that there was something I wasn't seeing inside of myself, right? And I started doing his practice, which is basically what you used to talk about, which is convince your brain you're okay. When you're getting up in the morning and you're afraid to take that first step, I got this. I'm good. There's nothing wrong with me.
Oh, I still
And
talk about that too.
this is what he was talking to. And I could see that I didn't get that part, right? Because we can think that, but the actual like um direct experience of it, right? That's different than
Believing it.
thinking,
Yeah, believing.
believe, yeah, embodying it, right? So I started to embody that I'm good, I'm happy, I'm going to have a great day. I got this. What wonderful things are going to happen? And these were all things that you used to say, but I just didn't get it on the level I needed to get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. So this is a really interesting piece that once I started doing that, I knew that I was more focusing on my that mindset, right? What you always call the mindset, or our we're changing ourself, we're changing our being, basically. We're becoming a different self rather than that one that is fearful and focused and afraid or whatever that is. Something really interesting started to happen when I started to do that like regularly, like every day I would do this.
Mhm.
I started to gain more access to, well, first of all, the biggest interesting thing was that emotional despairing thing started to weaken, right? It
Still have some.
just, yeah, like magic. And it just started. And then one day I just noticed it was gone. It was like, how did that happen? Right. And so this is, the whole neuroscience is we're letting go of those neural pathways that we've been feeding, right? And we're creating new ones by
Uh,
being somebody different.
Well, can I just jump in here with that?
Yeah, yeah,
Because we don't get rid of a feeling of despair by trying to look at the despair and how do I get rid of this despair?
yeah.
Get rid of the despair by waking up and going, I got this. This is going to be a great day. How much fun can I have today? You are focused on what you want to create, not what you want to get rid of.
Yes.
That's exactly it. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, which is
No.
why my entire premise of everything I do is you're already okay. We just have to teach the brain that. Because if we constantly look at, like, I have mental health challenges, I have anxiety, I have depression. How do I fix that? Let me look at my anxiety and my depression. Well, whatever we focus on grows and magnifies. So why not start to look at, well, I can have a good day. I've got this. I'm strong. I'm capable. I'm a whole person. I don't know, you made the comment once or twice about becoming a new person. I think it's just shedding parts of us that are like the wet blankets of fear. We're shedding that and we're becoming who we were all along.
Right. our authentic self.
Our
Yeah.
authentic, yeah. And so I know
Yeah.
that's getting a little woo woo and all that kind of stuff, but it's true. We are so wrapped up in fear, worry about others' perceptions, just the fear of walking with a limp, with a cane, and what's everybody gonna think about me, and the fear of what is that? And please tell me, once you actually decided to go out there and do that, how much public judgment was there on you for walking with a cane and a limp? Any?
None. None. People were noticing, because a lot of people know me in my community, and then they saw me getting better. Right? And that was really interesting to them. They're like, wow, what's going on? Right. But one of the things that I had to really look at, though, Dan, was like the level of consciousness, where I was when the pain started, and what, and started connecting those dots, and looking at one of the things that started to show up. This was the interesting piece um, that I really was a real game changer for me. Was I didn't realize how much repression I had, you know, and I didn't realize how much fear I was repressing when I was going through those housing crises.
Mhm.
And I had to look at that. And when I started to embody and feel, and I feel more whole, feel not broken, feel happy, just feel grateful. Um, all of a sudden it almost felt like I gained access to that repression.
Mhm.
It felt safe or something to kind of start to come up. And not only the fear, but also anger. I repressed anger too. And the the personality of the mind body. I had it classic, the perfectionism and the self pressure. It almost seemed like the more I embodied wholeness and unbroken and feeling grateful and just, just good, I had more access to those places to not believe in them, and to let you. Does that make sense? It's almost like
Yeah.
before they kind of ran me and on an unconscious level, but the more I embodied this, I'm good, I got this, those places just sort of like left. They just sort of, and it's not that the fear left or the anger left, but the need to repress it and control it, and the self pressure. And I'll get to the IFS stuff in a minute, but that was a really important piece that I started to gain access to my emotional, whatever needed to be felt in this moment, much easier. Right.
Yeah. And I believe one of the core things I teach is that emotions are safe.
Yeah.
But for many of us, we've been taught for our entire lives that they're not safe. They make you a bad person. Don't you dare share how you're feeling with other people because there's social consequences. And we've been taught since we were yay big that emotions are not cool. Stop crying,
Yeah.
right? Don't you dare get angry. I'll give you something to be angry about, right? We've just learned through our entire lives that emotions are bad. But once we start to feel safer in general, and start to understand ourselves a little bit more and understand and actually have somebody go, no, emotions are safe. You're allowed to feel them. They're part of being human. You know, when the
Yeah.
brain starts to get that idea, many of these repressed emotions feel safer and they're allowed to come out without the judgment, without saying, I'm a bad person because I'm angry. And I remember specifically somebody was saying, Dan, I don't get it. Um, I've started to be able to feel some of the anger and the rage, and it's just pouring out of me, and I don't know where it is. And they said it was a couple of weeks where there was just a lot of it. I said, your
Yeah.
brain, that's a good thing. Your brain is allowing it because it is no longer dangerous or bad. So let it come out. And she also said after a while, it kind of stopped pouring out because she kind of emptied that bucket in the subconscious of
Yeah.
all this rage. And so the key is to know that emotions are safe. They make us human. Oftentimes, the emotions that we have are perfectly normal. And not only that, but justified, because not everything in life is fun to experience. And so, I mean, that's a core component of it. I don't make my entire process about, going and finding the repressed emotions. I think teaching the brain that emotions are safe is way more important than finding out what happened in third grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
And
for
I know
me,
there are, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, for me, it was more about like what's opposing the emotion, right? That I had no idea there was some mechanism in there that was opposing the emotion, that saw it as dangerous. And when it's, I had no idea it was in there,
A
right?
lifetime of programming that emotions are bad.
Yeah, yeah, and
Sweep them up,
it's all unconscious. It's all
sweep it
way
under the
below the
rug.
surface.
Yeah, sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, and and now that I understand, okay, those when the fears started to come up to a more conscious level, right? And my life, thanks Ingrid, got lifey, right? And that and the housing crisis started happening and the fear started to come up. Something in some mechanism in my brain said, oh no, here's some pain instead. We can't, right? Let's distract or protect. We
Hmm.
protect against that fear because that fear was more
Dangerous.
dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And those go back to some of Sarno's original theories.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I've done is I've taken those original theories and I said it's beyond just emotions.
Yeah. For
You know,
sure.
it could be all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
emotions are absolutely part of it, but not everybody has emotions as the starting point to their symptoms. Some people might go in for a routine surgery and the trauma of that, and then the worry that this might not get better. They have pain 2 years after a knee
Yeah.
surgery,
Yeah.
not because of necessarily some repressed emotions from a long time ago, but just the emotional fear and attention that they give to the pain post surgery. And next thing they know, their brain
Right.
has learned. So there's all sorts of reasons for chronic pain. But in
Yeah.
my opinion, it's all based on perceived danger.
Yeah.
And the pain is a response to that. So if we teach the brain we're really not in danger, the body already healed, if there was a original physical cause like surgery or injury. But in many cases, we don't necessarily have to go back and find the third
Mm-hmm.
grade event. But if we can teach our brain that it's okay to feel whatever's coming up, the brain will go, wow, we don't need to protect joy from those emotions anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And any emotional cause or any emotional perceived danger can start to ease up. And so, little tangent there, but what else did you want to share with
Well,
us?
what you're describing, I just want to add is what you're describing, like, the surgeries or like long COVID. It's like, it's a classic example of our brain being a learning machine, right? And so what do we want to teach it, right? Do we want to teach it that the surgery is going to be dangerous and we're never going to get better? Or do we want to teach it that I got this, right? And the beautiful thing is our brains can change quite easily. They're neuroplastic and they can learn different things, which it show when we recover through mind body, we really start to see that, oh wow, this totally changed. How did this change? And you listen to people that have recovered and they're so happy, everybody's like, this is amazing because their brains changed. And it does feel like a miracle because you feel very different on the other side of it. And I think that's what I mean by, becoming a new person. But it's a different mindset, it's a different perspective.
Yeah. I
So,
love
anyway, oh,
Well,
go ahead.
I love that statement. The brain is a learning machine. And that's actually a video topic that I just wrote down because it's so true. The brain learned to keep symptoms going. The brain can learn to eliminate them. And
Right.
that's all we're doing here. There's nothing to heal, there's nothing to fix. Your brain is working perfectly. Your nervous system is working perfectly. It's just operating on misinformation and fear. And so I love that term the brain is a learning machine, which it absolutely is.
Yeah, it's been learning all along, everything. And we're not subject to that. We're the ones that can teach it, right? We're not the
But we
victim
don't
to the
think we
brain.
can. So many people believe like my brain is just running the show. No, you don't
Yeah,
understand how much conscious control you have on the inputs into this
exactly.
system. And with the right inputs, this amazing physiology and this energy called the human brain, it knows what to do. Give it the right inputs, and it will create a pain-free life. It will create a depression-free life. It will create an anxiety-free life. It will create happiness, joy, purpose, meaning, connection
Yeah,
with the right inputs. But with inputs that are all negative and fear-based and despair, and I'll never get out of this, and that's the dominant thought
right.
process all day long, it's not surprising that that's what we get.
Yep, yep,
So
yeah,
this literally is a mindset game.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, and you can just watching it in little ways. You can just notice it in little tiny ways and play with it, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be about this big problem of getting rid of our symptoms. It can be about, oh, can I just feel happy today? Can I just feel happy for an hour? Can I feel free, right? Of concern. And it's kind of like exploring that a little bit. And I think that more that we do that, if we're in opposition to our experience and our pain, our brain goes, oh, we've got a problem, right? And
Resistance.
that's
Yep.
that's it right there. And that we have just fed our brain that experience, that,
Mhm.
and it takes that and goes, this is must be what's happening. So we pay attention to what we're giving our brain, and not in a perfectionist way, right? But in a way that's just like more kind of curious and light, right? We're not like goal oriented. We're more like, how much influence? And I used to love this, what you used to say, how do I influence my brain? Right. And in the influencing, you're the influencer, right? That is who you are. And you're also what brings in kind of authority. And this brings me to the next part, which I really want to share with folks, is in the internal family systems approach, it's not a fixing approach at all, but you're the influencer. You're the one that brings in ease. So they have like the main component of internal family systems is the loving adult, right?
Right.
And the loving adult is really the one that isn't about fixing or getting rid of or opposing. It just wants to meet these places of our psyche that are kind of frozen. They're like constellations of consciousness that are afraid of what people think, right? Or um, got to get it right or whatever. And we just learn to have a relationship with those parts so that everything starts to relax. And and one of the biggest components of IFS, I don't want to get into this too much, is really looking at the fear and the symptoms rather as the protector, and having and being the loving adult. And you used to say this all the time, thanking your brain for keeping you safe, right? And we have this relationship with their symptoms, our pain protector, we call it, and having a relationship with it that's loving and accepting and kind. And thank you for helping me. And also, almost like curious and supportive, like you want to support the protection, the pain protection, rather than I've got to get rid of you. You want to support it. You're doing a good job. And in that way, it kind of tricks the brain and it
Mhm.
goes, oh, she's like supporting this pain. She's thanking it. She's actually loving it. And, and maybe you can't get that place, but the loving adult in you, which is this non agenda, unbiased, nonpartisan kind of place within us that knows how to meet all of these parts that are in opposition. And it has this relationship with the pain protector that is thank you. And I've literally applied that while I'm walking on like a big hike, and all of a sudden I'll get a little flare and I'll just say thank you. And it goes, right?
But you're
It's
not
just wanting,
fueling it with any fear.
I just say thank you. Oh, look good. And we can do this. And this is a really important piece because I see this a lot in my body people is they don't like their perfectionism, right? They don't like that aspect of their personality. But in IFS, we see perfectionism as also a protector.
Mm.
And it's protecting something kind of vulnerable inside, right? And it could be repression. But instead we just say thank you, right? And thank you for like keeping everything safe, right? Because it's a kind of a personality that we've adopted to stay safe. And in this way, we start meeting all these aspects of our psyche that we've developed and they're kind of frozen. And we allow them to relax and they just start moving into a more feeling included. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But I've seen in myself whenever I've applied it, and I don't want to take too much time with this, but when I've applied it in myself, I've seen these places like in the developmental stages, what are people thinking about me, for one? Just change, like in a few minutes, just change. It isn't a big, long, drawn out process. It's just meeting what's here right now, like you always talk about, in a way that is loving and accepting and kind, and no pushback, no opposition. It's because if we don't like places within ourselves, like what are people thinking about me, or the perfectionism, or that, if we don't like any parts of those, the brain is going, we got a problem, right? It registers that danger. And so learning to relate to those parts of our personality, that's been really helpful for me um, because of that high level of got to be perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
yeah, many of those personality traits, which Dr. Sarno talked about decades ago, um, it all boils down to perceived danger. All
Yeah.
those things, perfectionism, do-gooder, people pleasing, right? These are all symptoms of a brain perceiving danger. And those personality traits that we developed oftentimes as a young child were our survival strategies. Because if a child is growing up in a fairly chaotic environment, being perfect is the best way to keep safe so they don't cause any trouble. And I'm going to do good. I'm going to people please. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to stuff my emotions. I am not going to be difficult in any way, shape, or form because that's how I keep safe as a child. And we carry those things through. And so understanding that now as an adult, not that we can let go of those survival strategies. We don't have to fix them. We don't have to become a different person. We can still get joy out of helping and pleasing other people, but maybe doing it from a different place as opposed to I'm doing this out of fear, as opposed to I love helping other people because that brings me happiness, right? And
Yeah.
so we just learn more that these things that may have led to a lifetime of vigilance and protection, we don't have to get rid of them to get better. We don't have to change our personality to get better.
Great.
I love that phrase that you used, loving adult. Is that what
Yeah,
you
me
said?
too. Yeah, loving adult. It's
Yeah.
the loving adult.
And I've often said, um, become the parent to yourself that you wish you had growing up. Treat yourself the way you wish you were treated, right? And that, I mean, this is all gets down to self-kindness, self-forgiveness. None of this stuff is your fault. It's just where you ended up. But the good news is, as a loving adult, we can look around and go, I'm actually okay. And there's a lot of value in starting to go, stop judging myself so harshly. Because so many people find out about Sarno and TMS and mind body and perceived danger pain and go, I did this to myself. Oh no. And then they get terrified of their own brain. They get terrified. They get fearful of fear, and they get tangled up in this whole thing. Like, okay, Dan, my body's not the problem, but what's wrong with my brain? Why am I doing this to myself? No, 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 no. Your brain is working perfectly. It is your protector. It's doing everything it can to keep you safe from what it perceives as dangerous. It's our job, to use this word again, to influence the brain and teach this learning machine that we're actually okay. And when the brain gets that, it goes, ah, the whole system settles down. Anxieties, depression can go away because we get some hope, and the whole system can settle down. The pains can start to lessen or move or shift. And if we don't view pain as the enemy, it's really not, it's a protector.
It's a protector.
Um, the whole system can settle down. And you and so many others are an example of that. So
Yeah.
I just jump into these tangents when I
I know you
get
do.
the urge. So sorry about that. I'll let you keep
You're
going.
good.
But the
You're
IFS is
good.
pretty interesting. I've never studied it. I'm aware of the parts work, and I know some people who
Yeah.
have become
It's lovely. It's really simple. And the nice thing is you can learn it. I mean, maybe somebody helps you along for the first few times, but then you can learn it and use it whenever you feel, the biggest benefit that I've seen with it is that we start to see where what we call the critical parent. And it shows up, and there's a way of, like, let's say we're feeling fear or anger or some sort of any feeling. When we're with the loving adult, the loving adult asks, is there any opposition to this feeling? And we can look around and we can say, yeah, I can feel there's something here that is opposing it. And the loving adult says, okay, now just ask for some space, ask for it to step back. And it's immediate. It's really cool to watch how this loving presence just brings in, like, something new, that the brain goes, oh, I'm safe now. I don't need this opposition.
Mhm.
And because this is all happening on the unconscious, the things that the brain has learned. And so I've seen it, things change really quickly, like in a few minutes. And we're not going back into the past. We're not. And the beautiful thing is we're asking these places within us that are still maybe fearful
Mhm.
or insecure, right? That
True.
we give them a voice. We're not asking them to change. And and in this way, there is more safety. Um, anyway, it's just that one little component that might help with when we're fighting ourselves, because I think that is what happens. That's what keeps people kind of in a fear loop, is
Right.
right, is when they're fighting themselves and they see parts of themselves as still dangerous, like the perfectionism or the people pleasing, right? Yeah.
So if we're to sum up some of the emotional side of things, because it seems to be an area which you're particularly uh, interested in, uh,
Yeah.
held by, or believe was a big step in your journey. Um, is it really just getting to the point where there's an acceptance to the emotions and a welcoming of those emotions? Like, can you kind of sum that up from a mind body perspective, how that worked for you? And then we'll get
Yeah. I mean,
because I know a lot of people are going to be saying, well, how are you feeling now? How's your pain now? How's this? So I want to like loop that back in and
sure,
let
we can
us
do
know
that
how you're
too.
doing. Because I remember you, showing some pictures of you up on mountains doing some hikes. So let's make
Yeah.
sure we wrap that in too. But, what
Yeah.
is your take on the value of the emotional lessons you learned?
Okay. The emotional lessons that I've learned is like for a while there, I had to like kind of scan myself, like, because the repression tendency was so strong. And I would just scan myself to keep showing my brain that whatever wants to be felt here is perfectly safe. And it just, I would just take a minute or, just how am I doing? How am I feeling? How
Right.
am I feeling? And I would feel into the somatics of the body, right? How am I feeling? Oh, maybe there's some shakiness. Maybe there's some insecurity. Maybe there's some anxiety. Maybe there's this. That's fine. We're good. And I just kept reaffirming that whatever I was feeling was human, was
Hmm.
normal, was safe. And it was just allowed and allowed and allowed. And, that whatever wants to happen is human. I mean, it's just part of our existence, right? There's nothing wrong with any of it. And in that freedom, the brains just started letting go and letting go and letting go. And now I am doing very big hikes. I just did 2 in a row the last couple of days, both of them over almost 10 miles each, thousands of feet in elevation, lots of off trail, up steep, loose inclines, and I'm not a spring chicken, but I am back doing what I love and
So
being
cool.
high up in the flowers and so grateful, um, because not only am I doing what I love, but I feel way more free. Like we said, this authentic self that is perfectly okay with its human existence, whatever it
Yeah, your
wants to have.
emotions, your spirit, who you are is just
Yeah,
showing up as very comfortable with yourself,
yeah, yeah,
content with who you are, where you are, what your life is, enjoying things. Um, and for those who may have forgotten, Joy's out in Colorado. She's doing hikes of some serious mountains there.
I'm going backpacking next week. I'm going
So
to put on my backpack and I'm going to go camping. And that's a big step. That's a big step.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm pretty inspired. I'm also really inspired about the implications of my body because I just feel like it's a huge component of our growth and our evolution as in our neuroplasticity of our brains.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, because we're healing a lot of multi-generational. I don't know if you believe this, but I do. I mean, I know my mom was a fearful person.
Yeah.
You know?
And we learn that while growing up.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
grow up in a household with a lot of health anxiety, guess what you're going to have?
yeah,
Health anxiety,
yeah,
so we absolutely learn from our exposure to the world. Parents, siblings, mean kids at school, judgmental teachers, relatives, neighbors, you name it. Our entire experience is just filed away neatly in this thing called the subconscious. And
yeah.
the brain, the primary objective of the brain is to keep us safe and alive. And if it perceives any danger, any number of things can happen. Sometimes it's pain and other symptoms, but oftentimes even negative, fearful thoughts like, don't do this. What if that happens? Just even negative thoughts are a protection mechanism from a brain trying to keep us safe and alive. Don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, what if you go
That's a
out with your
that's a
cane,
good
you're
point.
limping, and people might judge you? It's just a brain trying to keep you safe with the thinking. And so
Yeah,
when we really start at the foundation, the brain's job is to keep you safe and alive. All of these things it seems to be doing that are against us are really for us. It's
it's
just misinformed. And it's our job to instruct it better provide better inputs and influence it to care for us in a way that is supportive and less protective, because in most cases, all these protections are based on false alarms, misinformation, and fear. But when we can remind ourselves often, make the dominant voice, I'm okay, the brain goes, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You want to
Yeah.
go on that hike? Go for it.
Yep. I know this morning I'm getting ready for the interview and I feel a little shaky. There's a little bit of nervousness coming up, right? And it was, instead of like, oh, don't be nervous, be calm. Instead, it was like, oh, thank you. I get it. Yeah,
It's
this is
okay to be
coming
nervous.
up. And then it just went. So it's all just that little shift of approach of like
Yeah.
thanking the protection. It's just a little, that's all it is. It's just a little protection going, something wrong might happen. It's like, oh,
I
thank you for saying this. Yeah.
yeah. I get a bit of anxiety prior to every single group coaching call.
Uh-huh.
Because there's a
Yeah.
certain part of me that goes, uh-oh, don't know what I'm
Yes.
walking into. And certain people come in with a degree of sensitivity, vulnerability, fragility, fear, crisis. And sometimes it's like, how do I best help these people? So yeah, there's absolutely anxiety before a meeting, during a meeting, afterwards going, how did that go?
How did that go? I'm so glad you mentioned this. This is helpful for people, right? I mean, this is good because this is normal. This is normal stuff that
Sure.
humans that we experience.
Yeah.
It's part of our mechanism.
Yeah. And even, my daily videos, there will be times where I'll shoot a video, I'll start uploading it, doing my thing to get it ready for the next day. And I'll go, I said some things. I don't know if that's going to sit well with some people. And I'll like rethink it, and usually I just go, okay, you know, just let's let it go, put it out there in the universe. And inevitably I don't get crap about things. So, but we all have those doubts and worries. And did I say the right things? And
Yeah.
I hope this comes across the right way and
Yeah.
everything. So
Yeah.
fear is normal, worry is normal, caution is normal. It's just our brain doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up from a symptom standpoint.
Okay.
How are you feeling these days?
I'm good. I mentioned I did two big hikes in a row. I had a little flare the next day. I used to get flares like right after, right? And so I've been trying to hike every week, at least one day a week. And I used to get flares right after and they would last. And now I get them like I'm doing much, much bigger, more strenuous stuff. But I'm also working muscles. I didn't use my leg for a year and a half, right? So I'm using muscles that haven't been used, and I'll have muscle pain that triggers a little bit of a flare. And this is kind of common.
Okay.
And it's only the next day. It's never right after. And
How about during
it's
the hike?
no,
Okay. So for anybody
no,
listening, that's evidence that the hike did not create any injury or damage, because injuries are felt in the moment they happen, not later or the next day. The other thing I will just point out, my opinion, is that oftentimes if symptoms show up later, we've got a brain that's always kind of looking out for, are we okay? Are we okay? And the normal muscle fatigue that you feel from doing
yeah,
an extreme um, hike with a lot of exertion, the normal muscle fatigue and even muscle soreness can be interpreted as, uh-oh, did
yeah,
we overdo it?
yeah,
And even if consciously you're going, no, I'm fine, this is just normal muscle soreness, the subconscious is still doing its best to keep us safe. So sometimes the muscle soreness can be many degrees more intense than the actual exertion would have caused,
yeah,
because of a brain that's just trying to keep you safe and trying to go, don't do that hike again tomorrow. Let's give you a little bit of sensations. And um, I mean, normal muscle soreness after exertion is normal. It's expected. But sometimes the subconscious fear And sometimes the conscious fear of literally going, oh no, I'm hurting today. Did I do too much? Maybe I should cut it back. And maybe, oh, I'm going to quit hiking because, and we can feed that process with so much extra,
Mhm.
what I call secondary fear, with the thinking and second guessing and judging ourselves. And I did too much, you know. I did a video recently that says, I did too much. And the
Ah,
concept there was, no, you didn't. You did more than you have been doing.
more. Yeah.
And I think that's a much better phrase because I did more, and the brain's
Yeah.
just trying to keep us safe from this, I believe, um, barrier called too much. And I
Yeah.
literally will have people say, well, how do I know how much is too much and how much isn't? It's like we get to decide that,
Yeah.
right? Don't we?
Yeah. 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 And
Based on our
I mean,
expectation and our fears. So go
yeah. Yeah. No, like what you can do. And I'm definitely at a place where I can really push the boundaries now because I'm seeing like, wow, this is really amazing. Like, look what I'm doing. I did my very favorite hike the other day and I was just elated, right? I was so grateful. And
ahead.
I got a small flare, but my joy at being able to do it was signaling the way more safety to my brain than, oh, I might have done too much. It was a lot more than what I was used to, but I know I was capable of doing it because I
Yeah.
did it. I did it. And there was no pain. Well, I
No
just
pain,
doing
no pain during it, but delayed reaction
it.
pain.
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody
Yeah.
interested, go to dansyoutube.com and search for delayed reaction on the channel, and you'll see my video speaking about this exact thing where symptoms that come up later is a result of the brain perceiving I did too much.
Yeah. And you'll watch the flares just get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And I just, if I get the flare, I'm like, oh, this is just a flare. It's nothing. It's just nothing. The brain thinks it might have done too much. And that's exactly what I think. I really have the clarity about that.
I like the
Yeah.
reframe of saying I didn't do too much. I just did a little bit
Yeah.
more, and the brain is still uncertain, so it's going to
Mm-hmm.
raise the red flag a little bit and say, "Hey, hey, be careful. What are you doing?" That's when you
Mm-hmm.
go, "Shh, we're good. I got this. It was a blast. Look at what I did.
It
The
was so fun.
the view from the top of the mountain was astounding, right?" And then you can just remind yourself, and this brain that's just doing its job to keep us safe, remind it. Didn't you see that view? It was amazing. Look what
It's
I did. And I
amazing.
remember you, Joy, sharing pictures in the Facebook group of the private coaching
Yeah.
community of just you on hikes.
Yeah.
And so that was always really fun to see.
Yeah. Thanks.
So
Good.
if you had to give anybody advice who's still in the thick of it, really in significant symptoms, deep in the fear, deep in the worry, deep in the I don't know if this is going to work for me.
Right.
Any like what would you tell somebody who's really still pretty scared and uncertain?
Well, for one thing, I can remember that place very well.
Hmm.
Um, and I had to borrow your conviction. I had to hang on to it. And you kept saying that. And because it's difficult when you're in a dark place and you're in a lot of pain to believe it that you're going to get better. I know it's really hard to imagine that because you had this pain for a long time. But if you can shift your mindset enough, just a little bit, like, I know I'm safe. I'm looking around and I'm fine. I'm safe. There's no danger anywhere,
Right.
right? And start to really understand. I think really understanding the science behind it is so important, and not approach it with getting rid of your symptoms, but rather convincing your brain that you're really safe, that you're fine. And those applications, use what works for you. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm safe. look at how good this meal is. I'm so grateful. And, that whatever application you can use to feel better, to feel happier, lighter, safer, just those little increments of improvement internally are gonna turn the brain's perception of danger and its need to have a protection off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that all comes down to focus on what you want, not what you're trying to get rid of. I'm so scared of this. I gotta get rid of this. I gotta get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's hard. I had somebody ask me, or not even ask me in a comment, just say, Dan, I don't get it. How can I possibly get to indifference? And my response was, indifference may not be available to you now. Indifference says, I don't care if I hurt or not. And that's not always available. That may be available much later in the process.
Much later. Yeah.
But understanding what's going on, knowing that this applies to you, realizing there's a cure and believing that you can follow some proven steps and that you're capable of reassuring yourself that I'm actually okay, despite the symptoms, which sometimes are screaming at us. Calm reassurance and starting to expect the best is absolutely things that have to happen well before you can literally go, well, I don't care if I hurt or not. Right? Because indifference, that's like the end of the road. That's not the first step because people are like, how can I be indifferent?
Yeah.
Right now, you probably can't be. So let's take that off the table.
No. And, I couldn't get to indifference for a long time.
Hey, thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Because I would take a step and it would hurt. How can I be indifferent to that? Yeah.
How can you stop caring? But you can always remind yourself of the reality that, okay, I'm not really damaged.
Yeah.
The brain is creating this to protect me. Thank you, brain. And that I'm actually okay. And this is a false alarm and all of the things that I talk about, daily. But you can always reassure yourself. And then if you start to shift the intention, the attention towards this is going to be a great day. How can I have some fun? The sun is shining. I'm going to enjoy this hike as opposed to, oh no, trembling in fear. Am I really this crazy to go out on this hike? That expectation or the fear level versus the positive expectation makes all the world a difference.
You just reminded me of what I used to do when I was in the group, and I remember taking my cane and walking, like a very short distance, very, very slowly. But I was focusing on the bird song and the beauty and the leaves and the sounds and everything that was around me and just giving my brain a new experience. And I think that is really important if we're continually giving the brain the same experience of, oh no,
that's all you're going to get.
Yeah, but we give it just thinking about that. Oh, a new experience. What would a new experience be for me today? And make it your own, make it your own new experience. What would give my brain a new experience of safety, like happiness and whatever that might be for you?
So for the people who say, I can't even imagine myself pain-free, what would you say to them?
Well, but you can't imagine yourself doing what you love. Mm-hmm. That was something I could always have access to. I couldn't imagine being pain-free, but I could imagine doing things I love.
Yeah. And for people who say, I'm not good with visualization, I can't even imagine that, mm-hmm. I'll often say, okay, I understand that you can't see that right now. But if you could, what would that look like?
Or the feeling of it, what would that feel like? What would it feel like doing what you love? Yeah. What's the emotional, because that is, they say the brain doesn't know the difference. Right. That when you're giving your brain an emotion of happiness and gratitude and freedom and joy, your brain doesn't know the difference between the actual real experience of doing something that does that and making it happen. And that was what I was talking about. That was the game changer that really changed
Yeah.
it for
People have
me.
an aversion to the word visualization because it seems too much self-helpy. And I'm like, okay, forget visualization. Make believe.
Yeah, feel it. Just feel
Imagine.
it.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
make
feel
believe.
it.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but the other thing I'll also point out is for people who say, I can't visualize, I'm not good at
I'm
visualization.
not good at visualizing either, just
But time
FYI.
out. Yes, you are. Because for years, you were visualizing being full of pain and hurting and
Oh,
horrible day.
and being in danger, and the
Anytime
world's a
you're
bad
thinking
place.
about something a minute, a day, a week, a month, a year away, you're
Mhm.
visualizing.
They're very,
We're
yeah, well said.
experts at visualizing. We're just running the wrong script
Yeah.
on this movie called My Future. And so, what would happen if you started watching a different movie than the one that's full of fear, despair, pain, agony,
Yeah.
sadness? Well, that movie kind of, forgive the language, that movie kind of sucks. And what you started doing was saying, I got this. I'm good.
Mhm.
This is going
Yep.
to be a great day. You started watching a different movie. That was visualizing, whether you
Yeah.
wanted that or not. You started to practice that. And with practice, it became easier. So
Mhm.
none of this stuff is a light
It did.
switch. It takes practice, awareness, consistency, the knowledge up front, and then just make your dominant thinking, I got this. This is good. We're going to get there. And even though I'm not there yet, and right now the symptoms are extremely colorful, that's where I'm going. And I know it's possible. And if you don't have the belief, borrow mine, borrow Joy's, borrow any number of the success stories.
Yeah. And that's what I had to do too. I had to really watch these people and listen to them.
Yeah.
That was really important part. That helped a lot.
So
So,
any other thoughts or, things you love to tell people?
um, no, I just, what you were sharing about, how giving your brain a new experience, giving that script, flipping that script is such a key component because that's the neuroplasticity of our brain, right? That's working with that changeable, learnable machine that can change things. You're just giving it new information. And
Right.
it's not complicated. That's the beauty of it. And so you're really exploring, wow, I can really change my experience. I can change like my whole way of relating to my life. It's amazing.
Now, before the call actually started, before I hit record, you mentioned that you're really gearing towards trying to help some other people out. Is there anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, so I went through Dr. Howard Schubner's program for practitioners.
Mhm.
Him and Hal Greenham, who's a
Yeah.
psychologists, they created a program for practitioners to be coaches. And so I went through that. And I just kind of wanted to learn more from him because I really have a lot of respect for him.
Me too.
And I, I had my primary doctor, I've had massage therapists and PTs in my little community. They all see me getting better and they're all aware of mind body, but there's no coaches. And they have all asked me to become a coach. So I am now a coach and I am starting to take clients and I created a website,
What's
which
that?
is it's my name, joysharpmindbody.com. All one word, joysharpmindbody.com. And I, I just want to give people, same like you, education, assessments. Um, I do want to offer that other kind of internal family systems approach just to give people more tools
Mhm.
to bring in more safety into the brain. Um, so, Howard says that sometimes there's about 25% that kind of hit a plateau that need just a little bit more of a psychological approach. And I kind of want to fill that, fill
Oh,
that niche because I think I'm kind of good at it,
cool.
actually.
And
Yeah.
for anybody listening, and I'll probably try to include the link in the description of the video, but it's Joy, Joi Sharp, SHARP, mindbody.com.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
not JOY, because that'll probably put you
It'll
somewhere.
go, it'll go somewhere else. And also Dan, I wrote a book that you're aware of, and I just kind of like to give people this.
Hold
It's
it up.
not really a how-to book, but it's my adventure story. And the first part of the book is working with Dan and what I did, like how I went out and went camping and walked with my king and and listened to the birds. But anyway, here's my book. This is a proof copy, so it's got a little tab across the front, but it's called Unpredictable Grace. Um, my
On
adventure.
Amazon.
It's on Amazon. It's both in the paperback and Kindle version.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Cool.
people seem to like it. It's a little adventure story.
Awesome.
Um, and I know you're going to write a book, and I'm thinking also about writing another book that's going to work more with the psychological components you know, that I'm passionate about. So anyway, yeah, thanks, Dan. This has been fun.
Well,
This
I
is
really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
yeah,
Obviously, if there's ever anything I can do for you, whether it be personally, pain, symptom wise, or in the coaching world as you move forward with that, by all
yeah.
means, reach out. But
Okay.
it'll probably take a few days for this video to get edited. And we put that nice little blue frame around it. And my son does that stuff for me. So
Nice.
I really appreciate you doing this. Hopefully, to everybody watching, you found this beneficial. And thank you, Joy. I really, really appreciate you. And keep in touch. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank
All
you,
right.
Dan. All
Take
right.
care.
Be well, everybody.
So long.
Bye.